Welcome to Biztech's Enterprise Technology Show. Our guest for today is Praveen Kumar. He's the Senior Vice President and General Manager, Asia Pacific at Rocket Software. Rocket Software empowers organizations to create impact in the world through innovation and in legacy technologies. With deep expertise in IBM Z, IBM Power, and database and connectivity solutions, Rocket Solutions power tens of thousands of global businesses solving real problems and making real impact. Now, to tell us more about this, welcome to the show, Praveen.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for having me.
Now, Praveen, tell us a little bit about Rocket Software and how it's grown over the last couple of years.
So, Brian, Rocket Software has traditionally been very, very strong in the Z space, in the mainframe space. And they've had a lot of technologies around it, around modernization, around enablement, operational capabilities on the Z space. Early last year, Rocket acquired ASG, one of the acquisitions, which really transformed how the company would grow beyond what it already has. And now ASG came with a very strong footprint on data, content, and the infrastructure space, something which complemented what Rocket already had in the Z space around infrastructure management. And subsequently, Rocket now has become almost an $800 million company globally with the collaboration of Rocket and ASG. And we now run 46 of the 50 Fortune companies globally, in the top 50 companies across infrastructure, content, and applications. Our focus has traditionally been, and very heavily in today's scenario, is around modernizing the infrastructure, content, and application landscape in most of these companies, which includes data, which includes unstructured content, structured content. And when I said unstructured, I mean scanned documents and all of that. As much as we want to enable customers who are running on legacy infrastructure, which could be Power or mainframe, enable a much modern way of interacting with the customer set on the distributed side.
Now, Praveen, I'm going to get back to you on that point, particularly in terms of legacy systems, because that's something that I have some experience in, and I want to share some insights into that as well. But today now in the Asia Pacific region, as you've done that merger, what does your footprint look like? And give us an idea of some of the customers and verticals that you serve in Asia.
So historically, ASG was very strong. I come from ASG, so I'm one of the few management leaders in the merger who've been retained as part of the Rocket ASG venture. And I got the opportunity. I was running ASG Asia Pacific, and now I'm running Rocket Asia Pacific. One of the things that we had as a benefit in ASG is we were very heavy in the financial space. Almost 80% of our customer base was either in the insurance, trading, or banking industry across the region, right from Australia to Japan. With Rocket, not only did we get some enhancement in that space because they are already in that space, but we got a very large footprint in the manufacturing and automotive, and in that space, which ASG hardly had a solution on. Secondly, ASG was predominantly in the data, content, distributed side, as well as in the infrastructure management on the mainframe side space. Rocket came with the Z platform space, but also added on a very large Power BU, which is the I series footprint. And obviously, between the mainframe and the I, the number of logos that you bring in is almost 30, 40x compared to what the number of customers on the mainframe are, maybe sometimes 100x, depending on where you are. So the number of customers really grew. And when you talk on infrastructure, we were using DevOps in the mainframe, automation on the mainframe, automation on the distributed, and then Rocket brought in DevOps on the distributed, automation and integration on the distributed side, as much as even in the I side. And that kind of complemented. So from a landscape product perspective, there were hardly any overlaps. Rocket completely merged with ASG. We had each product completely different to each other. From a sales and a support perspective, Rocket didn't exist everywhere that ASG did, and we hardly existed wherever Rocket did. So it was a very nice complementary integration that went through. And we were one of the quickest globally to integrate and start selling the common portfolio right from January this year. And that helped us go to market with a broader footprint, which all the sales guys could discuss with the customers and go to customers on either side of the spectrum.
Now, so Praveen, with this merger that basically had very little overlap, obviously what happened is you were able to serve existing customers better on both sides. Could you share some insights and success stories in terms of how you were able to do that?
Yep. Now with every integration, usually what tends to happen is there's conflict. Luckily in this, there was none. And again, the best part about it is the number of customers that we could get to was just humongous. And I was discussing with you before this, it's like taking a camel to a river and saying, hey, there's so much water and all of this water can be drunk. So it's like all the AEs and all the account execs and all the leaders were really excited. Now that opened up a different problem, which is, can I meet all my customers? Because you have so many customers to talk to, can I get to them? And we started shortlisting some of our key customers across ASG and Rocket and said, let's start opening up the portfolio to all of them initially. And it was an amazing experience. We've had customers who were desperate for certain solutions, which Rocket could not offer prior to the ASG integration, which we managed to deliver. Like in Philippines, one of the banks, which actually goes live later this week or has got partly live, has moved from a competitive automation platform to ours. And that movement took us about 1.5 years. So all of this happening during COVID, right? And the fact is, when travel was not possible, when AEs could not go face-to-face with customers. Similarly, there were customers in the ASG landscape who were running the AS400 or the I series of the Power systems, and ASG didn't have a solution at all. So we went and positioned the DevOps portfolio of Rocket, the integration and the automation and the modernization portfolio of Rocket, and they just lapped it up. So technically, I would say the customer satisfaction rate was high in ASG and Rocket. And now when you bring both of those companies together in a customer where similar complementary needs are there, it was amazingly successful. So across banking, insurance, and manufacturing, where we didn't exist at all, when we went to the manufacturing space, we found out there was a huge opportunity for selling content solutions, because a lot of these guys running on the AS400 and the Power BU were storing unstructured content either within BI or in any form of file storage mechanisms on the distributed side. So if you went in with our solution, which was Mobius, it provided them a landscape which gave them a lot of structured way of managing and storing content outside of the eye, but which could be interfaced with the eye.
Now, one of the key challenges, and you alluded to this earlier, and I said I would come to this, is around legacy systems and integrating them with more modern systems. Now, we tend to view legacy systems as being archaic and slow. And I still remember talking to a CIO about 20 plus years ago about moving his mainframe system, which at that time probably had occupied a whole floor of a large building, which is probably the same computing power as a Blade today. But he was terrified of trying to move that into an AS400 at that time. But these problems still exist today.
Absolutely. Absolutely it does. And you think of it as a problem. I used to think of it as a problem because coming from the distributed side of the spectrum, I'm not as old as I look, but and I'm not as young as I look either. But I'm at my age, I would say I'm in between the older generation of the mainframes and the younger generations of all the mobility technology people. And I skew more towards the distributed side of the world. So when I came in, I was like, oh, somebody's using a mainframe, that's going to die. Why is still running the mainframe? It should be off this platform very soon. And now when Rocket came, I'm like, you're still using an AS400? I didn't see one since 2008. So I walked in with that kind of perspective. But it was an amazing experience when you discuss the challenges that they have faced. It's not around the platform itself. The platform is extremely stable, extremely scalable. The software has been built, custom built by the application vendor to utilize the power of the hardware that is there. You know, if you look at the latest Intel chips or the AMD chips or whatever that's coming up, they're continuously changing and trying to improve the performance of each core and trying to improve the architecture of those platforms. And you go back to these mainframes and these S400s, they are extremely scalable platforms on a single box. You don't need to run 5 AS400s to cater to a workload which you need to run across 5 Intel servers, which means you're running one box. So the software was built to understand these applications. So their challenges have never been, can I run this well? Is this stable enough? Do I have downtime? That's never been the problem. And when you go in and speak with them and you say, wow, that's amazing. Because on the distributed side of the business, that's always a problem. I'm short of memory, I'm short of storage, I'm short of performance, so I have to keep adding boxes. The challenge is more around integrating with the distributed landscape, which is where all the mobility and the modern technologies are coming in. So how do I interface something which is written in COBOL or RPG with something that's being written in Python or in React or in some other mobility technologies that you have in front? So how do you get to that interfacing? And the skills needed, whatever little skills you need on the mainframe or on the AS400 or the I series. And that's been the bigger challenge. And that's where I think we have not done enough to market the wonderful solutions that we have. For example, we have a solution that's a low-code, no-code platform for the AS400 I series and the mainframe, which helps you spit out APIs. It helps you spit out REST APIs. So guess what? Any person who doesn't understand COBOL, doesn't understand RPG, doesn't understand Fortran, or whatever technologies you want to use in the mainframe or the I series, can click, drop, and make the workflow and give this API. The moment you give that API, I can now interact from React or any MuleSoft or any API platform back into the mainframe or the AS400 or the I series, which means I solve that big challenge of interaction and integration between two different platforms. A big issue today, right? Today, if you go to IT, and I'm a business guy, and I say, I want to do a change, and let's say I'm selling insurance, and I want to change or tweak something on my mobile or on the web. The IT team is going to say, oh, it's going to take 3 days, but I want to launch it tomorrow. And IT tends to be the stoppage, whereas with this, IT won't be a stoppage. The second thing is skills. Because I don't have something like this, I have to code everything on the legacy SOAP or the infrastructure that's there in JCL on the mainframe. That becomes a challenge. So I have to get skills, and no young guy is going to be excited to work on this technology. Whereas when we bring in something like this, they can use their Python, they can use their regular coding and get onto this platform without having to learn this legacy while the integration's working. And you keep a very small set of people who are managing that I series or the mainframe landscape. The second problem is around green screens, right? So you have a lot of green screens. We've had manufacturing companies come to us, and I was talking to one in Australia, and he said they have to data entry and then do page down and then data entry and page down. I'm like, what? So they said this is painful, and the guys in the dealerships and the local team, they just go berserk about this. And we have a solution that can just transform the green screens to HTML with a click of a button in the GUI that you need. Now, the moment they heard it, they said, we have 7,000 screens that we want to move off the green screen. And we showed a demo and we showed a pilot. They were like, wow, this is easy. We said, yeah. So this project's like less than 4 months, you're going to migrate 7,000 green screens off to a distributed side portal GUI. So I think the skill problem, the ability to go to market quicker, the integration issue, which has a direct impact on cost, is all managed. It's just that earlier it was treated as a challenge because you didn't have a solution. Correct. The moment you get a solution, you're like, hey, just use this and the problem's solved. So when I didn't know it, when I was sitting in the ASG side, I thought of it as a challenge. You come to Rocket and you say, you have these wonderful products. It's just that we haven't marketed them
Now, Praveen, the other thing which you also wrote in a byline recently is revolves around tough challenges around data, whether it's being able to get the right information, able to interpret or summarize data, getting the data, accessing it in a timely manner. That's a big challenge for companies. Tell us about that and the cost of it really. How much is it really costing organizations?
So yeah, interestingly, both modernization and data have been high costs. We first I'll cover modernization as I was on that topic, but about 30% of modernization activity is actually wasted. Okay. You redo, that's a lot, and we're talking trillions of dollars. And if you go and speak to any business unit, you will see they keep redoing the app again and again and again. And many times I've heard IT companies tell and IT employees, they're going to do this, but they're going to fail. And guess what? When they fail, they come back to me. And this is employees of that company telling us this, right? It's not even the system integrator. The same thing is on data, because data, you have a lot of data that's coming in. You're collecting data from various sources, and in various methods. And all of this data, when it's collected, is not in one place. Many people have a data warehouse, but just go and ask them, are you storing all your data in that warehouse? It's no. And even if you're storing it in that warehouse, yeah, the ocean has a lot of fish. Yes. And a lot of fish are similar. But do they all live in one place? No. They all live in different places. So we were doing a data project in Australia again, and this was a large insurance company. And the CIO told me that for every terabyte of data, they have 5 terabytes of that duplicate, of that 1 terabyte of data. For every terabyte of data, they have 5 terabytes of duplicated data. And then you say, wow, that's a lot. And he says, yeah, you look at test data, you look at production data, then you look at, forget all of that. He says, you just go and ask my marketing team, how many clients do I have? You go and ask my finance team, how many clients do I have? And you go and ask my sales team, how many clients do I have? If they are even within 10% of each other, I'll pay you whatever to give you a solution. So, and that's a fact, because all of them get data from their own source. You have a marketing solution, and they don't get it from a single source. So the data that they gather, and companies cannot get a single source. It's impossible today to have a single source of truth. And that's what most companies are trying to get towards. Like, I want to have one place where I can have everything in one place, and that's where it is. And you take banks, right? I was talking to banks, and I said, you have this KYC information. So you're running loans, you're running normal accounts, you're probably running a trading account, and all of that is with the same bank. And I collect documents for all of these, and I store it in different places. And suppose I am taking it at different points of time, I have different KYC data as to my address, my pay slip, or whatever. So the content that you collect, whether it's structured or unstructured, is just humongous. And if you're talking 1:5 for that insurance company, I don't know how much it is for many others who are unorganized. So the landscape there is, how do I find out how the data flow is happening? Which application? So if I get data from X and I store it in Y, how does it move? And how does it go from Y to A to B to C? And how does it get transformed? There was a bank in Singapore, and we were doing a project, and they said, this is a Singapore bank, right? They asked me a question. They said, do you know what country do most of my customers come from? And I said, yeah, Singapore. And he said, no, Afghanistan. And I said, what? You have most of your customers from Afghanistan? He said, when I data entry, is the first, Afghanistan's the first country that pops up. So guess what? They just say, enter that, enter that, enter that. And he said, when I look at the date of birth, it's like 1900 something. So data entry has been corrupted. So you have to go and cleanse that data, and you have to bring it together. So we help in trying to get how the data is getting transformed from A to B to C. Where's the source of that data? And can you converge that source of data based on the reporting that we would give And again, you have to go, and I'm not saying that's the end of the world, because that just helps you with one piece of stuff. You'll have to go and understand how you can transform that data, what else can be done, et cetera, et cetera. So some of the GDPR, DCVS, and all of these, which are running in the financial space, is helping financial companies restructure and spend some investments in this space. But if you go to manufacturing, you go to other lines of business, it is total chaos. And that chaos needs a cost to fix. And that's not the priority for everybody as of today, because they continue to mine and continue to market the content that they.
Okay, then probably let's take a step back. What advice would you give businesses who want to embark on modernization? Because again, it's a path that is fraught with potholes and obstacles along the way. What are some best practices perhaps that you can share? So
as I said, 30% of the spend that you would do on modernization as of today is guaranteed wasted. So don't waste that 30%, don't go and burn that money. And if you actually go and introspect that, you will find you might be 30 to 50s, the 30s an average. So sometimes people are wasting 70%. My advice is have a look at how you can first step interface modern technologies with the infrastructure that you already have. Once you do that, once you understand how the process flow is working, once you understand what are the needs of this, then get into a modernization footprint rather than going in by the marketing and sales that all these application vendors on the distributed side would come and give you. For example, if I'm running an ERP on the mainframe or the AS400, I'm going to have an equivalent ERP on the distributed side, and they'll say it's easy to implement, but each entity is unique. And the amount of customization and interfacing you've done is immensely complicated. When we merged Rocket with ASG, it's such a small entity. We had 2 different CRMs. It's taken us a year and we still haven't integrated it. So we're not posting about it, but the fact is we're making sure when we integrate it, it's accurate. We're not spending money trying to just move to another platform just because it's available. So first step is make sure you have the interfacing, and companies like us can help you in that interfacing and make your cost fairly low. And then once you understand, you can then decide if you want to migrate. We met a very, very, very large bank in Australia running on the mainframe. And when I met their key stakeholders, they said, we have a 10-year roadmap not to move off the mainframe. They just told me on the face. They said, 10-year roadmap, we don't want to touch anything on the mainframe. We're going to modernize how we interface with the mainframe, exactly to what we said. As long as we can get the interfacing right, I don't want to move off the mainframe because the costs are not so high. Whereas if you go with the first intent of, I need to move off the mainframe, you are basing yourself on a symptom and a herd mentality rather than trying to understand the problem and fix the problem.
Back to what you said earlier, isn't it? Because, and I remember my days and looking at mainframes and AS400, the software is optimized to take advantage of the box.
Correct.
And so because of that, it probably runs it far more efficiently than a distributed platform can do today.
Correct. I totally agree. And I have seen more botched migrations which have reverted back and I think certain banks have taken a very clever approach. I know of a bank in Singapore who has multiple countries where they exist. So they've said, I'll move the smaller countries off to the distributed side, but my core on the base, which is in Singapore, I'm going to scale my mainframe. I'm just going to pump it with more infrastructure power. And that was a very clever decision. So they could move all the smaller entities, but the big one, which is carrying bulk of the load, is not being touched and moved because they know the challenges that they would get when they move. It is a multi-year project. We know of a bank in Philippines that's actually migrating off the mainframe to the distributed side. It's a 5-year transformation project. And across those 5 years, they're going to spend all of that. And I just hope they're successful in migrating. But if they aren't, you guess you burned 5 years and you're going back, which means you're pulling yourself away from the market in terms of your modern technologies that you could bring forth. So plan heavily, as I would say. Singapore as a country plans a lot before they deploy a road or allow a building to be created. There is sense in it. So I would say plan a lot, understand the costs associated with it, and if you can get solutions to integrate, do that as a first step before you start modernizing.
Now, Praveen, but before we leave, any final thoughts you'd like to leave the audience with?
No, thank you, Brian. I think one of the things that we want to tell people is we're not only talking about I and Z, which is what we've spent a lot of time on this conversation, because that's been one of our key topics in terms of modernizing your infrastructure and your landscape, because we do tell, don't forget the old, think about the new. And that's a key thing, right? The old is very important as much as the new. But we also are very strong in the distributed space around content, data management, as well as the automation space. So if you have requirements which involve managing unstructured content, managing structured data, trying to do data governance, as much as you want to modernize your infrastructure and move to a very modern environment where you can integrate and perform better, then do approach us. We have not explained ourselves well in the market so far, which we've started. So if you are unaware of some of the solutions which can really simplify, and we can prove it to you in days, if not hours, you would be stunned at the options that are available to reduce your dependencies on skills, reduce your dependency on time, improve your go-to-market, and also reduce cost.
Now, Praveen, with that note, thank you very much for taking your time to be on the show.
Thank you, Brian. I appreciate your time.
I'm Brian Fernandez, and we've been speaking to Praveen Kumar, the Senior Vice President and General Manager, Asia Pacific at Rocket Software, on BizTech's Enterprise Technology Show. This video and podcast will be on our social media platforms, as well as our website, www.biztech.asia. It'll also be on our syndication partners, TV stations, radio stations, and websites. Thanks a lot for tuning in.